Grief isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, founder of the Empower Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. Each episode brings real conversations with people from around the world who've navigated profound loss and found the strength to rebuild their lives with courage and intention. Together, we'll explore what it means to move from survival to integration, reclaim your identity, honor your grief journey, and create a future grounded in resilience and purpose. Walk with us as we transform grief into growth, one story at a time. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to invite you guys over to empowergriefjourney.com, where you can explore recent episodes of the podcast, grab a copy of the Empower Grief Journey anthology, and book a free grief clarity call to discover your own Empower Grief Journey. Today, I have an amazing guest with us. It's been 4 months since we last connected, and I'm excited to have her on the show finally. You guys are going to love her. Her name is Carissa Karban, and she's a systems architect and shadow alchemist whose expertise comes as much from life as from formal training. She's lived through profound grief and the quiet unraveling of identities, ending marriages, leaving careers, releasing the versions of herself that were built for survival instead of truth. Through dismantling her life and rebuilding it piece by piece, Carissa discovered what embodied what it feels like to be humble and willing to begin again. Carissa's journey is proof that deconstruction is a doorway and reconstruction is an act of love. As co-founder of Astropuffs and the Heal Collective, she channels these lessons into creating emotionally intelligent technologies that honor the human heart. Her work is devoted to systems inner and outer that make it easier to be kind, present, and fully alive. And so, without further ado, Carissa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's great to be here.
Likewise, and I love what you said in your bio that you sent over that your journey is proof that deconstruction is a doorway and reconstruction is an act of love. That's such a powerful statement for grief.
Mm. Yeah, it's so funny. As I was listening to you read that, I was like, wow, that's really good. I did well on that one. It's so true. I think we live in a culture that would have us believe that deconstruction equals failure, right? It's bad. It's something to be avoided. There's this sort of pressure. I don't know if you've experienced it, but this pressure that we're just supposed to be getting better and better and faster without any sort of missteps or anything unexpected happening. And so I've had a lot of unexpected left turns in my life. And as I learned to embrace them rather than avoid them, I found that's really where the healing begins.
Well, I think that's, we get brought up in life to, have our kid years, if you will. Then it's go to school, then it's go to college, then it's get a job, get married, have kids. We get told this kind of linear path of what life should look like and what life
Hmm.
should feel like. And, I was talking about my 18-year-old self with one of my old high school teachers I'm still friends with. And I said, I thought I was really smart and had it all figured out at 18. I was the dumbest kid at that point. Like life hadn't beat me up yet. And that's what to your point about deconstruction, life isn't linear. We get hit with those left turns that come out of nowhere, and we're not very prepared for it because our mindset's been linear path, but then we get hit sideways and we go, okay, well, now the course just shifted 180. How do we play that field?
Totally, absolutely. I think, it's so funny. There are so many cliches out there that there's a lot of wisdom packed into them, right? It's not what happens to us, it's how we respond to it. And I think that cultivating the resilience when the left turns happen, rather than trying to walk on eggshells or check all the right boxes to avoid that sort of pain. It's for me, it's knowing that's part of life, right? The left turns, the 180s, that is part of the life experience that we're here to live.
Yeah, and I think, I've learned a lot from this podcast because I've talked to people who've gone through divorce, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story. But I wanted to share a quick thing too. I had talked to somebody who got divorced years ago, and this thing stuck in my brain for whatever reason because we've again associated so much stigma around divorce about like, oh, this person or that person, or they did that or said this. And I learned from this woman that went through a divorce. She said, we got to a certain place in our marriage where we just realized we were two different people. And there
Mm,
wasn't a negative context to what happened, but there was this, our lives were going two different trajectories. And the minute we both realized that, all the animosity, all the separation, things like that, all went away. She said, I'm still friends
mm,
with my ex-husband. And I said, you've got a very different outtake on this than I've heard traditionally. And so I love that people like you are willing to come on the show and talk about those experiences of life because we can break through the societal stigmas and beliefs and that limited view of things, and really get an understanding of what deeper and more impactful things are through these experiences of left turns in life.
Yeah, I love to say that relationships don't fail, they come to completion.
That's powerful. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think we have this, to your point, like the linear, narrow view of what a successful relationship is. And how often do we ask someone, "Oh, how long have you been married?" Rarely do we ask, "What's the quality of your marriage?" Right? Are you enriched? Are you fulfilled? Are you really happy? We tend to just ask, "Well, how long?" And we measure the success of a relationship based on longevity alone, when in reality, to the example you just gave, right? If you're two different people and it's actually hurting you, it's not serving you to remain together. I think there's something really beautiful and mature and freeing in saying, we came together not in this idea that, oh, we weren't meant to be together. It's yes, we were meant to be together for this period of time. We were meant to have these experiences, to learn these lessons. And now the time has come to move on to different relationships or different ways of being that we can't do together. So there's a sense of completion rather than, oh, I failed because this didn't last forever.
Yeah, and I think to your point that you brought up as we started the podcast, we get too focused on we got to move fast, we got to move forward, we got to move quick, we got to be quicker, and we get caught up in this forward momentum game. But we oftentimes in that train of thought, we lose out on the actual experiences that do take us there. And so if we have any kind of setbacks or pullbacks or shifts in course, things like that, we associate so much negative pain with it that we think that, oh my God, I'm a failure because I'm not moving forward fast enough, or I didn't reach that level of things in life yet. And I think that's very common because of how our mindset gets built into our culture. But, to your point, those experiences we have, though, are giving us the lessons, the blessings, the gifts, all the things we need to take that next step forward.
Yeah, I mean, how much of life do we miss out on because we're busy resisting what is, because we're busy analyzing, predicting, projecting? There's so much that goes on in our heads that actually pulls us out of that present moment. So much of my journey has been, how do I quiet the mind, quiet the chatter so that I can be radically present in exactly what is unfolding right now?
I think that's something we all should strive for. I'm in trying to strive towards that in my own world of things. But before we go further in the podcast, share with listeners a little bit about the background of your story.
Gosh, the nutshell version is so hard. There's so much. I think we're all such multidimensional beings. It's hard to know what to bring forward, but that's where presence comes in. I would say, what's really interesting about my story is I'm twice divorced. And so I have the experience of both what it feels like to make the decision to end a marriage. My first marriage is I walked away from that one for reasons. And then in my second marriage, my husband, my ex-husband, is actually the one who decided that it was time to end the marriage. Very different, being on different sides of the table, if you will, in that decision, but a really beautiful experience to have had both, honestly. And so, yeah, I've gone through other breakups in addition to going through two divorces. And I'm also really grateful that now I'm in a partnership that truly is everything that I dreamt of in my second marriage, everything that I wanted and hoped for with my ex. And I can see now that it just wasn't necessarily the path that he was on, to your point earlier. It's not the path that he was on. And so by creating that space, by being willing and open to let go of that relationship, I created the space for what was to come. And so my ex and I, we had a very amicable, I call it a conscious uncoupling, right? We did it with love, with respect for one another, understanding that for me, it seems like I understand the pain that goes into a lot of the lashing out, a lot of the anger, the aggression, a lot of the pain that comes out during a separation or a divorce. And for me, because I really trusted that everything happens for me, not to me, it was incredibly painful, but I trusted that I'm held, I'm supported, all of this is unfolding in service of my highest good. So rather than fight what is, or what was in that moment, I embraced it and I said, I'm going to love Freddie is his name. I'm going to love him through this separation because I love him as a person. And when we talk about unconditional love, I really feel that was the embodiment of that. Unconditional means I love you no matter what, even if you choose not to be with me. So, how can I set you up for success? How can I love you through what could be a really painful experience? And that was, um, in itself, was really healing for me to be able to then move on from the relationship feeling like, yeah, I showed up as well as I could. I did my best and I honored my commitment in the best way that I could.
Yeah, and I think the reason it's so hard for many people that go through divorce is our identity shifts as we go through
Mm,
life. And that's
mm,
something I've been bringing up on the podcast a bit through grief is our identity shift that happens. And, when we're a kid in school, really young and early in life, we have our identity kind of around our toys or our bike or, our classmates we hang out with. And when we go to college, that shifts a little bit. Now all of a sudden we have part-time jobs, we've got college education class thing going on. Then when we get into relationships. Our
mm.
identity still slowly starts to, I would say it slowly starts, that's kind of how it happens, but we start kind of shifting away from the individual into this relationship dynamic. And some of us do well at that, some of us don't. And it is a life. And to your point though, it's all lessons that we have to learn through that. And that's why I'm not a believer in perfection of those things or some ideology that this is the perfect way to do it. There doesn't exist that way. But I think to that point, our identity shifts, and when we go through divorce, by the way, our identity shifts again because
Mm.
we tie ourselves to another person a lot in many ways, and we take on different beliefs, different values. We grow, we change, and when divorce happens, that identity cracks again, and now it becomes okay. I'm not the same person I was before this. I'm not the person I was in this. Now I'm somebody else, and I haven't met that version of myself yet.
Yeah, that resonates so deeply. I think for me, that's part of the grief journey that I think we don't often make space for is to grieve the identity that we've lost or that we're letting go of. It wasn't just my marriage, it wasn't just this person that I was attached to, it was really this identity of me as a wife. I had to and I got to let go of that and say, okay, I'm going to grieve this version of me because really I loved that version of me in many, many ways, and I think to your point about as we shift in life, what came up for me was really thinking about kind of the proactive shift versus the reactive shift. When we're choosing new experiences, when we're choosing, the college major or the job or choosing the new relationship, it often feels like that's what we're choosing and it's very exciting. But when things feel like they're happening outside of our control, sometimes we might create a story that we're powerless. This is happening to me. And really, it's all perception, right? Because it's the story that we tell ourselves that really impacts the amount of pain or suffering that we feel in an experience. So if we can say, I'm choosing this, even if it wasn't our first choice, but we say, I'm choosing how I show up every day, I'm choosing this new identity, that can help us take back a sense of empowerment, even in a really hard experience.
And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to get to that place because another thing we
Mm,
are wired as human beings and societal view of things is we are taught how to be very reactive every day. And, people will laugh at me if I make that comment, but I'll say, if you get up in the morning, rat racing to go to work and you're speeding down the freeway or whatever, you're auto in reaction before the day even hit you. You're already set up for that. And so it takes a lot of strength within ourselves to get up every day and not be reactive and be responsive. It's a big practice. I'm still learning that lesson a lot in my life, but I'm just saying it takes a lot of effort for us to be
mm.
responsive to our life instead of reactive.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing for me that helps give me grace, and I hope everyone gives themselves grace in, is recognizing that it is swimming upstream, right? The system we live in, the culture we live in, is organized in such a way to keep us in that autopilot, to keep us reactive because it's profitable, right? If we're always running around thinking I'm not good enough and I need more, I need to do more, especially this is something for me I, for a long time, have associated my output with my worth, my value as a human. So, to your point about getting up in the rat race, I was hustling for my worthiness in those seasons. And it makes complete sense that we would be rat racing if we actually internally believe that at some point we're going to achieve something or accomplish something that's going to satiate this emptiness inside of us, this hole that we've been taught to believe that we're not good enough unless we do more. and we achieve our way to worthiness, it makes complete sense that we would stay in that rat race, right? And so, to your point about the effort, I think there is energy and attention that needs to go into recognizing the water that we're swimming in, recognizing a question that I love to ask is who benefits from me believing this? So, when it comes to, especially in the world of grief, right, these left turns, these things that happen unexpectedly, and then we're expected to show up to work like nothing happened, right? And we're not expected to create the space to grieve. We think, oh, I just have to keep accomplishing and achieving. But what we also know is that the grief that we experience through the painful life experiences that come our way, that grief lives in our body if we don't express it, if we don't let it flow through us. And so instead of thinking, oh, I'm fine, I don't need to grieve, I'm just going to keep going, instead, we're just stuffing all of that down into our body, and eventually it can catch up with us.
I couldn't agree more with what you just said there because that's the whole reason that a lot of us are walking around as very hurt, very damaged people. And I always say that, some people hide it well better than others. That's really
Mm,
my belief because I see it through people when I coach. And, I try to let people know you don't need to hide that and bury it down because
mm,
the thing is that it's going to come up in one way or the other. And I've seen it personally in the workplace and past jobs I've had. I've been around people that have walked through divorce like you, and I don't know your exact situation, but I've been around people who've had a very turbulent divorce, one that is very emotionally heightened, very, very sensitive and volatile. And, those people that I've been around who was going through that, would oftentimes lash out or get very angry at somebody. And the thing that I caught on to really early on was it said that really had nothing to do with who they lashed out
mm,
at. Never had anything to do with that. They're holding a lot of pain and suppressing it in themselves. And this thing is looking for a way out somewhere. And when it gets an opportunity, it's going to take it. And this is why I'm a firm believer. I don't think most people are bad. I don't think most people do that intentionally to hurt other people. They aren't taught the skills and they aren't taught the ability to learn how to channel that in a certain way that's healthy for them to process and understand and find their own way forward through it.
absolutely. I like to use the metaphor of the Instant Pot, right? Like any kind of pressure cooker, it's as the pressure is building inside of us, if we don't have those healthy channels to release it, then eventually someone's going to say something that just adds, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? And then we just offload that pressure as a way to diffuse the discomfort and the pain that we're feeling in our bodies. And yeah, we can leave a lot of people hurt in our wake if we don't develop the tools and the resources and the support to help us move through it in a healthy way.
Well, I was reflecting as you were talking about how you said in one marriage you had, you made the choice to get
Mm,
divorced. The other marriage, it was your partner's choice to make it. And what I thought about that perspective is said, it's interesting that you got to be on both sides of the fence of a divorce, and a lot
mm,
of people don't get that, by the way, but that's a powerful perspective to have. That's a very powerful experience to have because there's going to be somebody out there who's going to go through a divorce either way, and they're only going to have that one perspective, but
mm,
you've got multiple perspectives now. And this is where I see what you've gone through is something you can help people with. You can help
mm,
other women or men or whoever it may be. You can help them when they are going to walk through that because you've walked that road before they've even walked it and you've seen kind of how it works, how it plays out. And I think that's where we can look at these situations where society might say, oh, it's a bad thing. I see it as a good thing. I see it as an experience learned. I see it as something that is helpful now. And that's where we're transmuting the pain into
mm.
alchemy. And that's where we can learn to help other people navigate hardships of life. And that's people don't have to suffer as much. And there's people like you and I have walked through the fire before and said, "Hey, we've made the decisions. We've walked the experience before you. We can give you kind of an idea what this looks like and how you can make the best out of it."
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the thing is we all want connection. And so I view every experience as a potential bridge for connection. Having a wide variety of experiences, I call it kind of like my Rolodex, where, you tell me like, okay, Chris, what are you passionate about? All right, I've got an experience that I can tap into to help build that bridge of connection. And so for me, having a variety of experiences, the good, the bad, the up, the down, all of it is really an opportunity to create that connection because especially in the challenging moments, the dark moments, oftentimes what is so hard, I've seen this and I've been in this role myself, is I believe when we haven't cultivated the capacity to sit in our own discomfort, that's what leads us to trying to solution, trying to provide advice, trying to help somebody get out of their pain because we're kind of subconsciously doing this projection of, wow, if I were in those shoes, I'd be very uncomfortable and I wouldn't want to sit there. And so it's very well intentioned. We want to help people get out of their pain when that can actually come across very much like you're invalidating or gaslighting or it's not okay to feel a certain way. So the more I've cultivated the capacity to sit in my own discomfort, my own pain, the more I can meet people and say, hey, I'm not here to fix it, change it, or make it different. I'm just here to join you in it. I'm just here to sit with you, to be present with you in whatever you're experiencing. And if there's some direction you want to go with it, I'm along for the ride, but this is your experience and you're in the driver's seat.
You know, what you just powerfully said there was a big difference between sympathy and empathy for people.
Mm,
I just love how beautiful that is because being in the grief space, I've always told people, sympathy can take you so far, but to your point, it can be, dismissive or invalidating or making the person who's having to talk to the griever, the person going through something more comfortable than the person that's going through whatever situation they may be experiencing. And to your point that you made, having that empathetic approach of things and allowing people to space to be where they are, meet them where they are.
mm,
I think that we spend too much time in life trying to run from the issues we face. I've talked to everybody from child loss like me to divorce like you to losing a parent, a pet, all over these areas. And I've seen a lot of people try to run from it to a certain degree because we all do. It's human
mm,
nature. But I think when we allow ourselves to sit beside somebody sitting in the mud of that, and it's uncomfortable, it's not easy. There's a lot of hard emotions that come up in that area. But when we allow ourselves to sit in that space, we allow ourselves to process and understand things. And that's where we don't end up lashing out or taking it out elsewhere externally, but we actually allow ourselves to process it and make it that experience we can draw on to help future people.
yeah, and I love that you brought up empathy. It's so funny. I just had this thought. I've never said this out loud, but I think there's also a difference between codependent empathy and interdependent empathy. I think that so oftentimes, just a sort of level set in terms of the definition of empathy, often, I love Brene Brown's research and I tend to quote her a lot often. And the idea of empathy is, can I connect to the emotional experience that you're having? That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have had the same circumstances that someone's experiencing, right? But if you're going through grief, you've lost somebody or something important to you. I don't need to have lost a child in order to connect to that. I can just connect to, wow, I've lost something important to me as well. I can imagine what you're going through, and that's got to be really tough. Where there's a difference, though, is I see a lot of people and hear a lot of stories of empathy fatigue, right? I'm so fatigued because I'm putting myself out there. I'm feeling what you're feeling, and it's really hard. I have a limit in what I can experience in terms of empathy. And that I think we need to be mindful of. Are we tiptoeing into codependent empathy, meaning are we identifying with that person's experience? Now, I'll say the disclaimer on this is if I'm going through a very raw grief experience of my own, there's a very natural time where I won't be able to hold space or have the capacity to meet somebody else in their grief because maybe my experience is just too raw and I need to be able to process and integrate that before I can hold space for others. So that's not necessarily what I'm talking about, but what I mean is when we say, oh, in order to feel empathy, I need to be in this moment experiencing that feeling of grief or loss that you're having. That's what empathy means. I think that's where we can tiptoe into codependent empathy. It's not about, I need to feel exactly what you're feeling right now. It's, I need to be able to connect to the experience that you're having in order to provide support, in order to see you and meet you in that. And I think there's still an energetic boundary that can be there that we can hold space in, but we don't necessarily need to fall into the exact experience that somebody else is having.
That is very well said because I think that a lot of us, at times, empathy has that crossing line, if you will. It's a place where it can go so far, but when you cross over the line, it's almost like taking on someone's experience and trying to take on their feelings and emotions. And that's
Yeah.
something that I'm very cautious of when I'm in grief work because there's times that I really I'm very, what's that word?
Empathic.
Empathic.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm very empathic. And so sometimes I resonate too deeply with people and I catch myself wanting to go there and I go, whoa, wait a second. This is their experience. This is their situation they've gone through. Those are their emotions of things.
Mm,
This is not mine to take on right now. And yes, some people say, well, how can you not do that sometimes? And I go, because it's not mine to take. And
beautiful.
it's mine to witness. It's me to
Mm,
be able to support, but it's not mine to take on. And that's where I think, as you said about codependent empathy, that's where the boundary gets set. That's where that energetic line is. And I think as long as we stay on one side of that, as far as empathy goes, I think we're very helpful, very supportive. But when we cross that line, it starts becoming this, I'm taking it away from the person who experienced it. And that's where I think we end up in a conflict.
mm. Yeah, yeah, it's a question of whether or not we're centering ourselves in the experience, right? And I think when we cross that boundary, it then becomes we become identified with what we're feeling, and maybe now we need support to move through it. I'll just use this as an example from my second marriage. That was something that was really hard for me when I was going through a difficult experience because my ex, love him, he's a lovely human being, so I have only good things to say. But something that I recognized was because he hadn't cultivated that capacity to sit in his own discomfort, when I expressed pain, it triggered him. And so then he was now in pain. And it became an experience where I had to basically come out of my experience in order to manage what he was feeling because he was getting angry or upset or just couldn't handle the discomfort that he was now experiencing. And then unfortunately we didn't really circle back to, okay, am I now whole? So I ended up doing a lot of the emotional labor to get myself through these experiences and then manage and like help support him through that experience because there was that kind of codependent dynamic, that identification, because he took on a lot of the responsibility that I think many people have that story of, oh, if my partner's upset, it means I did something wrong or it's somehow about me. And we center ourselves, and then it takes away our ability to witness and be with that person in their grief or their experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that because, in the biological nature of things, I talk about this loosely because some people misconstrue it, but we have masculine energy, we have feminine
Mm,
energy.
hmm.
And what I've caught on to a lot over the years, especially I worked in mortgages for 8 years and I worked with a lot of married couples and I saw everything from the nasty fighting divorces to the couples that got along extremely well. And what I caught on to is exactly what you're talking about, this balance of energies that happens. And I always say that when we're talking about marriage in particular, or even divorce situations, by the way, that energy gets out of balance somehow. There's either too much feminine energy, there's too much masculine energy. That energy, when it goes in extremes, by the way, switches sex. And basically, some women have to take on masculine energy to balance things, and men have to take on feminine energy to balance things. And when that's happening, by the way, we're stepping out of our traditional roles of things. Men are always taught, by the way, to be fixers, to be the leaders, the breadwinners, the supporters. We're taught to hold our grief in, not feel our feelings and emotions. Women are taught the opposite. Women are taught how to express emotions, how to feel emotions. They're taught supportive energy. We need both. We can't have them in extremes because then we're out of balance. And that's where we end up in a lot of disagreements. We cross boundaries empathetically. Like you said about having to step out of your energy to handle what was going on with your ex, that's when those energies are off balance. And I think it's important for us to recognize and appreciate the value of both because when we do get in those off situations, we can see it a lot quicker. And then we start seeing that, you know what, it isn't fully about me and it isn't fully on the other side, but here's what's causing the imbalance. And when you can figure that out, those heightened emotional intensities actually come down and you're actually able to meet in the middle and have those conversations that bring you back to togetherness.
I love that, Chris. And I actually, do you mind if I challenge that notion just a little bit?
Oh, absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
it. So I completely agree with you in what you said of when we become imbalanced in the masculine and feminine, that's where things really go awry, right? We need the integration. I like to say the rhythm as opposed to the balance, because to me, balance sounds more static. A rhythm is knowing what's called for in a particular moment, where I might challenge just based on my experience. And if this doesn't resonate, totally fine. But for me, I actually think culturally, especially in Western cultures, we're all conditioned to skew more towards the masculine and we neglect the feminine. So, in the idea of
Mhm.
saying, oh, men are taught this, women are taught that, I actually was not taught how to hold my emotions. How, yes, I was told I was expected to be the community caregiver. But when I express emotions, I'm angry or, I'm labeled a certain way. I have people, asking me if it's a particular time of the month, all of these things. I think we're all expected to be in that masculine energy of hustle and do and take action. And so for me, I realized about 6 or 7 years ago that I had almost no connection to my body, to my intuition, to my feminine cycle and my feminine energy. So I've been on
Mm.
a very intentional path of healing my feminine energy and integrating it into the masculine. And I've met a lot of other women who are in a similar boat where it's the achievement, it's the hustle, it's the go out and do. So we're really conditioned to be more in our masculine and we don't tend to have a lot of respect for the feminine. So I would say, regardless of your gender expression, that to me is the opportunity is really looking at, I mean, Rene Descartes, right? I think, therefore I am. We started glorifying the mind and cognition without a healthy respect and understanding for what signals are our bodies sending to us? How do we speak the language of our soma, of our intuition? And I think there's so much in a society that glorifies data. There's so much data we're leaving on the table because we're not paying attention. We're not respecting it. We just think, oh, emotions are a waste of time. I just need to think rationally to get through this without realizing that emotions are coloring everything that we're doing. And it's exactly what you were saying earlier. It's really understanding how do we process those emotions in a healthy way. But that's where I just wanted to call out. I feel like culturally, the pendulum has swung really far towards masculine embodiment, and men and women alike could benefit from healing with the feminine.
I love that you challenge that because that makes a lot of sense to me. I think what you hit on that stood out the most with what you just said is emotional intelligence. I
Mm,
think that really comes out. In many ways, I see it happening a lot in society today, and there's always this because I'll just come out and say it 'cause it's just my belief of things, but women were very mistreated over history. The more I
mm,
read history, the more I look
mm.
back on even 50 years ago, just to go that little far window back, women were very mistreated in
Today,
society.
we don't have to
Even
go
to,
anywhere
yeah,
today.
even today too, I can say that.
Yeah.
That's just the facts. But I can also say the following that what is happening, by the way, is this overcompensation of things. And that's where I
Mm,
really,
mm,
I'd love to ask a woman this question if I could
mm,
find somebody that would not take it overly offensive. But my question is with that, coming back to emotional intelligence, when we know women have been mistreated poorly,
mm,
even still
mm,
today, by the way, we can get into corporate pay and things like that. It's all over the place. But my question becomes the fact of when society starts saying, oh, well, we're going to show women as the be all, can do all, see all, everything. They can give birth to our children, they can run a house, they can run a marriage, they can run the corporate ladder, they can do this. It starts to feel like an overcompensation that's actually
mm-hmm,
hiding underneath it, which is where I
mm-hmm,
like to go to is what do women actually want? What do women actually believe? What do women actually feel is where
mm,
I like to take that. I like to
mm,
step out of that societal label up here of like, well, we've mistreated women for history, but they can do all this.
mm,
I feel like there's a disconnect between what's actually going on with what women want, how women want to be treated, what they're trying to communicate, express, emote, versus what society pushes and forces on that topic. Do you have a thought on that as far as
I have
emotional intelligence?
so many thoughts on that, Chris. I love it. So I want to first start by saying I think the narrative that women have been mistreated, it's like, yes, it's true. And I come from a very strong position that men have also been mistreated. I think there's this skewed perspective that because historically men have held positions of power, there's an assumption that men are in control, men are doing whatever they want, and women are the ones who have been oppressed. I don't believe that's true. I believe in a culture that conditions us to believe that we're all supposed to want the same thing, be the same thing, do the same thing. I think we're all being mistreated. I think we're all suffering under this regime of you know, we could also say, oh, it's patriarchy, it's capitalism, it's all of these things, but they're all tools, right? And so I think when we live in this hierarchical system, again, we equate being in a position of power equals good, not being in power equals bad. But I love the
Mm.
question that you asked. What is it that women actually want? Because the beautiful thing about it is that everybody wants something different, right? Every man, woman, non-binary person, gender fluid person, whatever, however we express, we all want something that's unique to us. And so I think creating a system that allows, gives us permission to want what we want, not because our parents told us to want it, not because society tells us to want it, but just having the safety and the freedom to truly express what our unique desires are. I think that's the path to freedom because I don't want the same thing that a woman next to me wants. I'm sure you don't want the same thing that a man next to you wants. And so we do this thing where we collapse people into this very broad generalization of all women, all men. And that's is frankly silly because we're so diverse, we're so unique, and that's so beautiful, right? When we can really learn to celebrate diversity and understand, oh, I don't love, I'll use taxes as an example. Accounting, not my forte, not something I love to do. I'm so grateful that there are people out there who love accounting and doing taxes because I want to empower them. I want to give them my money to do the things that I don't want to do. And so when we can celebrate that instead of this zero sum scarcity mindset of it's me or you or competing with each other, when we can really celebrate our diversity of uniqueness, then we can say, oh, you go do your thing. I can celebrate that. I'm going to do my thing. It's the prescription that we need to let go of.
That that was very, very well said. I really appreciate that because I think the powerful part that we're shifting towards into society, and I think it's getting a lot of gridlock because it's going up against the system we've been in for hundreds of years, is individuality. I think that's the beautiful thing, and that's what honestly, it's what makes my podcast great. Every single guest that comes on my show has a different story, a different experience, a different worldview, a different mindset, different beliefs. And if my show was one story, one belief, one mindset, one conviction, I'm gonna be honest, I wouldn't listen to it. I'm pretty sure nobody else would.
Exactly. It'd be boring, right? Because we like variety, we like novelty, we want to hear things that are different. And yeah, I love that you brought that perspective forward. I think it's so powerful, especially in the pendulum swinging really far to say, okay, well, now women are expected to take care of the kids, do all the things, and you can have the career and all of that. I've burned myself out multiple times trying to have it all, and I don't even have kids. I don't even have all of the things that we're taught that we can have. And there's this idea that women can have it all. We just can't have it all at the same time. And I like your take a lot more that we don't need to have it all, right? We can have just exactly what it is that we want. If you want to have a thriving career, go do that. And if you want to do it with kids, without kids, amazing, go do that. We don't need to all look the same or want the same things.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of life, and it's really why I work in the grief space so much is because I always say the most powerful thing I've learned in the last year is that we may experience similar things, like in our collective groups of things, like I'm a lost parent and you've been through divorce, so we're in our different like areas of grief. We're going to meet people who go through the same experience as us, but the key thing there is we're going to experience it very differently. We're going to walk away from those
Mm,
things very differently. And that's what I think is so beautiful about it is that we have similar experiences, similar, you can put them in a bucket if you want, but the outcomes and experiences and lessons and things are very different because there's 8 billion of us walking the planet. That's 8 billion sets of eyes, ears, mouth, feelings, emotions. And we're never truly ever going to be able to step in another person's shoes and say, I know exactly how they feel. I know exactly what they experience. I know exactly what they're going to do. There's no way for us to do it. And I think that our system in, America in particular, oftentimes leads into group think and group belief, and that's where that individuality gets deconstructed into group modalities. And I think that's where the breakdown happens.
mm.
And that's why I'm not a fan of, that phrase makes me cringe a lot when people say, well, women can have everything they want. And I'm like, can you just not say that? Because you're grouping you're grouping women into a group of things that, like you just said, the woman next to you, I don't want what she wants. I want what I want. And I think when we celebrate that individuality, whether that's in grief, whether that's in career paths, whether that's in gender, in whatever way of life, I think when we celebrate that individuality, we're actually getting to the core of what this life is supposed to be and what it's meant to
Mm.
be for us.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think that complexity is what comes forward for me. Oftentimes, we don't have the capacity to sit with our own complexity, our multidimensionality, knowing that we can feel 10 different things at the exact same time. We're conditioned to think that we have to simplify. Everything has to be a simple answer. And I think simplicity is beautiful, but for me, it's simplicity on the other side of complexity that becomes beautiful, not simplicity in avoidance of complexity. And so if I can sit in my complexity, if I can give myself grace, if I can integrate all the different facets of who I am as a human, then Chris, I can meet you in your complexity. I don't need to collapse you down into a label, into a bucket. I don't need to put everybody into a bucket if I recognize that richness. But I really believe it starts with giving ourselves permission to be complex, to sit with that complexity instead of, oh, I need to pick black or white, A or B. No, it can be both and all of the time. It can be a spectrum. Everything gets to be as messy as we want it. And I think when we can cultivate that grace, then we can meet other people in that complexity too.
This has been such a powerful episode, Carissa. I'm really glad we got to have this conversation today.
Me too. This is so great.
Well, as we wrap up the podcast, I wanted to leave some space for you to share a little bit with us about astropuffs because I know you've been
Mm.
working on that a lot ever since I met you. And I had the chance to take a look at this through your website, and I have to tell listeners it is definitely something that stands out from all the other apps in the App Store. It's a very unique product. I'd love for you to share with us a little bit more about it because it sounds like it's going to be launched here soon, hopefully this year.
Hopefully beta this year. So yeah, so we are creating, I like to say we're creating the first shared world for humans and AI to play together. So as we think about the AI revolution, very quickly we're going to get to a place where we have robots working alongside of us. We have AI toys. Embodied AI is really coming. And so when we look at historically how humans do, exactly to the point of the conversation we've been having, when there's a lot of fear, when there's division, when there's scarcity, there tends to be a lot of violence in the integration process. But through the lens of play, we're more receptive to connecting with other people. We're more open to learning. We don't necessarily care as much about where you come from, what your political alignments are, if you're AI or human, when we're working together towards that shared goal. And so through the lens of play, we're creating it's a mobile native open world cozy game. It's multiplayer, so it's really about fostering connection and it's about getting to experience the adjacent possible. What happens when we're more community oriented? Our progression through the game hinges on pro social behavior, generosity, and giving rather than scarcity and competition. So it's really showing much the way that sci-fi, Star Trek showed us what it was like to have a video conference call with someone when we thought that was complete craziness. And now it's commonplace for us to be on a chat with someone around the world. And that's what we're really aiming to do is through the lens of play, through this cozy, safe environment, how can we showcase what would be possible if we're willing to lean into a new paradigm of connection, of complexity, of being with one another in order to create a better community. And that starts with connection to ourselves as well. So we're building this game. We've been working on it for about a year at this point, and we are aiming to hopefully get to an open alpha or beta later this year, and then a full launch probably next year.
That's incredible. And tying in our podcast and even tying into grief, I love that this is about bringing people together. It's put in that space of play. I try to tell people that when I coach, when we're in a state of play, we're in curiosity,
Yep,
connection, learning, growth. There's not a lot of negative emotions or feelings in that space because it allows ourselves to be in our more natural state of who we're supposed to be. And so I love that you
exactly.
guys are creating an AI body for that. And I've been nervous about AI a lot just because I don't fully understand it. But I do think it's going to be a wave of things coming towards us in the future. And I think in a lot of ways, used correctly, I think it's going to be a valuable tool, just like Zoom we're using today didn't exist 15 years ago. Um, but look what it's
Exactly.
doing for us today.
Exactly. I think it's really our relationship to the thing, not the thing itself. So, are we using AI to feel more optimistic, to get more connected, or are we giving into the fears of, oh, it's going to replace me? And I understand exactly why it's creating a lot of challenges for us. We are at a huge inflection point societally, and I think we can be there to be that beacon of hope and optimism.
Well, I think you're on a very powerful mission, and with this use of AI, I think you're going to bring a lot of people together through your app, Astropuffs. So I'm excited. By the way, I'm going to sign up on the wait list because I'm really curious to get in there and play with it. If you get that beta test going, but I'd love to support you all the way. So I really just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today. This conversation was very powerful in so many ways. I had a lot of takeaways. I hope listeners do the same with this. But Carissa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. Yeah, would love for you to sign up for the wait list. Would love for everyone to join us. We're building for iOS, so iPhone first, but would love to have everyone come in and play test. And for us, it's really about co-creation. So want to get your feedback and see how we can integrate your magic into the game as well.
I love that. Well, for listeners today, I just want to let you guys know I will have links for Carissa in the show notes. So when you guys get done with this episode, jump down the show notes. You can reach out to her social media. You can reach out to her for Astro Puffs as well. Definitely go check it out, by the way. It's a really cool website I've seen so far. I'm really excited to explore it myself. But what I want to say for you guys listening today, I want to thank you guys for joining Carissa and I on this episode of the Empower Grief Journey. If this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share it with somebody you know who may need to hear the message today. And if you've been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure how to move forward in your grief, you don't have to figure it out alone. I offer free grief clarity calls where you can talk through what you're experiencing, help you understand what's going on beneath the surface, and find a clear path forward. You can book your calls at empowergriefjourney.com. If you guys are also looking for past episodes, you guys can go to Apple and Spotify and Podbean. I have all the past episodes of the podcast on there as well. I definitely recommend checking those out. I want to leave you guys with the following. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know that together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. But until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.